Okay, so these are the Jayme's Fund bears, and you start with strips of fabric that are cut right off the bolt, this wide. So they're long strips, they're 60 inches long. And we have these patterns that we can put on the strip, and they kind of stick to the fleece, which is nice, so you don't have to pin or anything. You just kind of lay it down and flatten it out, and you trim around it. Then you flop it this way, and you do it again. So we do them a couple thick, so you get 2 at a time, and the whole strip gets cut out. So that's the first step, is cutting out the bears. So if you have people that don't know how to sew, that's a good first step. That's a good first step for them. And we go from that bear cutout, which is a blank, and it looks like this, and we get embroidered faces on it. I do that at the masquerade, and the embroidered face looks like, this one's a green one. I do different colored ones.
Donna, how many faces do you think
I've probably done 700 faces. Here's a dark one so you can see that a little bit better. So the faces get done on an embroidery machine, and then they go back to Jayme's Fund. So you get bare blanks that have just a face. And the next step is then to put on a heart and a label. So we have little scraps of heart fabric. It's just a weird shape that we put on the bear, and we just stitch a free-form heart around it. Obviously kind of where the heart goes, and the label all goes in the same spot in every bear, right under the arm. And then the heart needs to be trimmed, because once you've stitched it, and I don't have one to show you, but we have these things called applique scissors. It's a really weird thing. And when you go to trim around the heart, because of the protective shape of the scissor, you won't cut in the wrong place, and so you won't hurt the bear at all. So after they're trimmed, and the faces are done, and the labels are on, the next step to a bear is to take a bear blank that doesn't have a face on it and put a ribbon. So we have people that cut these lengths of ribbon right off of these giant spools. So for somebody else who doesn't sew, that's another good thing that they can do, is cut ribbon lengths. And then somebody that's not really confident sewing might be able to sew these on. You just find the middle of the ribbon and the middle of the bear's neck, and you do a couple stitches to hold it in place. And when you're done, you roll it up, pin it to the back of the head, and it's ready to pair up. So that's the next step. So you've attached your ribbon, you've trimmed everything. So now you find a face that you want to put with the back, and you put them right sides together. So here's a finished face, there's the back of the bear, and I put them right sides together. If you're afraid of the bear moving around, you can put a couple pins in before you stitch it, but most of the time they just sit nice. Once you've got them lined up, they feel really good, and they don't really move much. And you start on one side, and you stitch all the way around. Now I usually start and stitch, here's the side, you can tell that this is the side with the label, and it's going to get the whole thing done. You have to leave an opening on the side that doesn't have a label. So I either start at the foot and go around, or I start up at the top under the arm and go around. And you just stitch around the entire bear, and you stop and you leave yourself a space. And when you're done with that, you end up with a bear that looks like this, and you can see that there's still a space there to turn it out. So the next step then is to trim in all the little corners, and you can see there's little clip marks here where I've trimmed at both sides of the ears and inside the neck. I've trimmed at the thumb and the wrist, under the arm, at the foot, and I've stitched up the leg. If you look at the size of the bear when it's first done, the leg is not cut out as a full leg. So what we do is measure up 4 inches, and when you're stitching around the bear, you stitch up to a point, take a couple stitches across, and stitch back down. And then when it comes to the trimming time, you chop up and you make the legs separate. So somebody who sews, it's best for them to do the trim, because if you trim and you cut through the stitching at all, you end up with a hole in the bear. And then it becomes a hospital bear, and somebody has to go back in and fix it. So we ask somebody who does sewing to do the trimming because of that. And then once you've trimmed it and you've put it right side out, you end up with a bear that looks like this. He's rather flat, and we have people who measure bunches of the polyester fiber fill that go into the bear. We measure them by weight and we bag them up. So somebody who doesn't sew can measure bags of poly fluff. And you take one of those bags of poly fluff and you stuff it into the bear. And you start first by stuffing it into the furthest extremities, like into the ears and into the arms, into the thumbs. We could use a chopstick to get it pushed in there into the thumbs nice and strong. Once it's all stuffed, then you end up with a bear that looks like this. And he still needs to be closed up. So then it goes back to the stitchers, and the person sitting at the sewing machine will fold in these edges nicely and just stitch through all of that on the outside. So it doesn't have to be hand done, it just has to be closed as close to the edge as you can. And then they stitch across the arm here, and across the arm here, and across the legs. And that gives them a little bendable spot. And then somebody else comes along and they unpin the bow and they tie the bow and they get all the dust and lint off of it with a lint brush, and then it gets bagged up. So here's a finished bear. And then when they're all done, they get bagged up and they get put with a little book. And that's the process of making a bear.